Okay, in this next series, we've just got 3 examples that I've taken randomly from the ethics code document I spoke of earlier. So this one is 2.1.3, no discrimination. The DSW or PSW does not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate with any form of discrimination on the basis of race, color, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, national origin, ethnicity, marital status, political belief, mental or physical handicap, or any other preference or personal characteristic, condition, or status. So here, the idea, spot the principle. What is the harm? Well, I'll lead it off with my suggestion. Discrimination is harmful, as we've learned from history. People are at risk of death, disability, pain, and suffering, being cheated of opportunity and suffering losses of freedom and losses of pleasure which others may take for granted. There are others potentially as well. We could speak about more of the harms that might be there. So, but I'm going to move on to what's the second principle? What's the doing good aspect that might be referred to anywhere in this statement? Well, refusal to condone or in other ways enable discrimination by others on any basis protects people from harm. So that's a good. And in addition to observing the law, which often is considered to be a good, makes available to our society the qualities and capacities of diverse peoples, talents, gifts, and ideas. This is essentially enabling our society to benefit from the qualities and capacities of diverse people, talents, gifts, and ideas. That's a good. I'll move on again to the third principle. What is the quality control aspect that might be referred to in this statement? Well, awareness, I guess, of the importance of both omission and commission. It's always good to be reminded of that. Making clear the grounds on which any form of discrimination is prohibited. So certainly clarity, directness of the communication. And the fact that people often sign on to these and own these, and in other words, personally agree to being held to these standards, those are all about quality control. Let's move to a different example. This one is 2.1.4. Again, I took these randomly, but it's interesting that this one follows the other one. Anyway, accessing support. The DSW or PSW uses every other appropriate and available resource where knowledge may contribute to diagnosis or assessment and or treatment in the best interest of service recipients. So what is the harm that is addressed in this statement? Uninformed actions can be dangerous and harmful. A little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. That is the harm. There may be other harms as well that are referred to there that people spot. I'm moving on to the next. What is the doing good aspect that is referred to in this statement? Informed actions can be used for good. Since the information changes over time, this also pushes us to keep consulting information from all available sources to continuously consider the good that can be done in any instance. So this addresses the fact that things change and we should consult or use every other available appropriate information and resource, and by doing so we may contribute to that information being allowed to change what we would have done. And the last, what is the quality control aspect addressed by this statement? If a professional consults, then access to information is improved. Knowledge gets from where it is to where it needs to be. Accessible information leads to better practice, and continuous improvements are available when people are continuously informed of what's new and what's the best practice of today. And this is our last example. This one you can tell is deeper embedded in the code. It follows under 2.1.6 and it goes on to 2.1 after that. The DSW or personal support worker PSW carefully considers when there is a need or when it might be therapeutic to appropriately self-disclose or share personal information about the DSW or PSW with the service recipient. The DSW or PSW never forgets that in the helper-service recipient relationship, she or he is the helper, not the service recipient. So what is the harm that is referred to in this document, in this statement? Anything that potentially can damage a relationship between a person receiving support and one providing that support could be harmful by commission or by omission. Burdening a person receiving support with the troubles of a person giving support is potentially harmful. There may be others again, and pipe in if you know. What is the doing good aspect that's referred to in this statement? Having a challenge in common sometimes improves the relationship and the trust of a person receiving support with a person giving that support. Credibility can be improved, leading to a better chance of success in leading the person receiving support to follow advice. There may be others as well. And what is the quality control reference in this statement? Generally speaking, most people agree that maintaining acceptable professional boundaries are safer risks. It's healthier for all concerned, both service recipient and the helper. And generally speaking, it prevents future problems that may not be anticipated at the time the decision comes to whether to share something or not. So in summing up then, let's just look at some of the principles of decision making that might help you to resolve any ethical dilemma that you face, and you will face many of them in the course of your practice. There's no doubt in my mind that that is so. So first, I would use this kind of algorithm or rubric for sorting out ethical dilemmas. Try to establish the highest principle that's most at stake. Remember that harm trumps good trumps quality control in the consideration of principles. So anything that may bring harm reasonably or that may, by its omission, contribute to the bringing of harm to a person should be the most at stake and the highest principle to address. Anything that does address itself to a probable harm, you should really strongly consider whether to go ahead. If your principle is a conflict of whether you're doing good or to what extent you're doing good, and it's not trumped by a harm that may come with it, then try to pick the principles that are highest even amongst doing good, and pick the one that satisfies the highest principle involved. Now, there can be great arguments about what's the highest principle, and remember that our highest principle typically is person-centered or person-directed, but many times organizational needs, wants, and interests trump the person who we are supporting and their best interests. Try always to keep that first and foremost, that it is the person we are supporting who should be at the top of the list. And finally, quality control principles. Those are always good to pursue, but not at the expense of whether or not we're actually moving towards doing good or making sure that no harm is committed. So pick the action that satisfies the highest principle. If it's so simple as to reflect that the highest principle is offended by one action but not the other, obviously choose the action that doesn't offend. Generally speaking, remember that due diligence, you cannot prevent all harm, but you must be aware that that is one of the possible consequences. So due diligence means you've done all the right things in the right way that you know how to do or that might be expected of a reasonable person. It's almost never possible to know exactly what the right answer is. However, the fact that you have consulted, that you have considered, and that you've ultimately decided an action based on an ethics code or clear and transparent principles of ethics, a professional consultant, should all be considerable protection against claims that you have acted irresponsibly. And one last thing I'll close with. I used to say when I boldly would choose an action that might be considered questionable, after having considered all of the above and having consulted with a colleague, that I would rather act consciously and be judged by a jury of my peers than to fail to act and thereby contribute to a continuing harm. And this is about having the courage to do what you think is right and to argue that you are doing what you think is right, and be prepared, if necessary, to be complained about and to be faced with a jury of your peers deciding whether you did right or wrong. I would rather that you act than that you hide behind uncertainty or a lack of authority or lack of any kind of power, or yes, just power, I guess, to do the right thing. Because a lot of people cause harms by omission in our field, and I would prefer that people be more conscious and deliberate, considerate of all aspects, and that they have the courage sometimes to step forward when others may wish to hide. It is not for the weak of heart, our field, and I will boldly say that there have been times I have stuck my neck out a great deal for people, and I wouldn't change a thing in that respect. Anyway, thank you for sharing with me today, and I'm looking forward to dialogue and discussion about this topic.